The gods of Olympus have abandoned me. Now there is no hope.
And Kratos cast himself from the highest mountain in all of Greece. After 10 years of suffering, 10 years of endless nightmares, it would finally come to an end. Death would be his escape from madness.
Hey everyone, how's it going? I'm playing Doom Eternal again. Dead Simple. Like the map Dead Simple from Doom 2. Anyway, throughout the month of August, I decided to revisit the PS2 once again, and it wasn't the first time I've done this either. I revisited Midnight Club 1, Need for Speed Hot Pursuit 2, Burnout Gran Turismo 3, Dave Mirra's Freestyle BMX 2, Tony Hawk's Underground, all of the good shit basically. But it would take a long time for me to finally get around to the earlier God of War titles, 1 to 3 most specifically. Before, I had only played 2018, which wasn't the best starting point since I didn't get to appreciate the references or callbacks from before, but it was a game I still really enjoyed, and I plan on replaying it again this year before getting ready for the Ragnarok PC release. God of War as a series was a reflection of the 2000s hack and slash era where we had gotten titles like Devil May Cry, Dynasty Warriors, God Hand, Omnimusha, Ninja Gaiden, Nano Breaker, and many more. They all involved action-based combat with a variety of movesets to utilize, and God of War had fit into that category too. The first game was a big hit, won several awards, and even spawned its own phase of clones. Games like Ghost Rider, Conan, Heavenly Sword, Two Human, Dante's Inferno, and a few more. Like other popular games with their own clones, the developers that tried to make their own God of War clones tried to replicate the success that the first God of War achieved. Companies were no different back then and still followed where the money went, so if it smelled green, then that's where they would go. God of War at the time showed some of the PS2's capabilities, and even though the 7th gen wasn't too far off, we were still getting some games that really pushed the hardware. The PS2 is my personal favourite console, and I wished I had experienced the first God of War game, as well as 2 back then. But this year, I made up for it and decided to see what the fuss was about with God of War 1. This was a more unfiltered version of God of War, being unapologetically brutal and sometimes revealing the real reason people watched Game of Thrones. The ancient world of Greece was grim and humans lived at the mercy of the gods every day. You're in Athens finding bread in the markets, it's well made and baked by loving hands, and then you look up and you see a large red-haired god giving your city the Godzilla treatment. It was the kind of world where growing old in a way was a miracle because of how much shit was going on, how much chaos was just being spawned from, not just the warfare that was ensuing, but also the presence of the gods and their machinations. In the eyes of Kratos though, Athena! His world is also bleak and his greatest mistake is quite literally all over his skin, which you find out later. It's a game of regret and revenge intertwined into a fantastic burger combo of hack and slash gameplay, platforming and puzzles that made up the fun and satisfying experience that was God of War 2005. For those coming from the newer titles, it is a very different beast that you're working with here. Kratos moves faster, is more vertical, has more jumping capabilities, and isn't tied down to the cinematic approach to the gameplay like you see in The Last of Us or the newer God of War titles. The cinematic feel that this game does exhibit does come more from its beautiful set pieces rather than the gameplay itself. Every area you go to in God of War 2005 is always a spectacle, illustrating a society that was way ahead of their time. You had this grandiose and epic feel to the world surrounding you, and the elegance of the ancient Greek structures, the larger-than-life objects, glorifying the very real gods that dominated the everyday life of human beings in this game, just all added to this beautiful picture that was God of War 2005. Kratos in this game is also part of their grand design, but he has his own motivations and reasons for assisting the gods, and it's for the hope of having his 10-year-old long and ongoing nightmare coming to an end. People that have seen Kratos in the past have seen him as an angry god-killing machine, never happy and always in a bad mood. The stories in 2 and 3 are more about getting revenge against the gods themselves. The first game though is a more personal story, and it's a story that acts as the catalyst to Kratos' journey throughout the games, tying into Kratos' personal mission and desire in this game to kill Ares and get rid of his nightmares forever so that he can finally find peace. Throughout this game, you'll be slowly learning his past and why he's going this far, doing something that would seem impossible by many. And it's all displayed with beautiful attention to detail of the world, the grounded setting of ancient Greece, and the challenging but fun gameplay. Playing this game was honestly refreshing because after the Elden Ring DLC, a part of me wanted to just move on from the Souls-like formula and rediscover some other combat systems for a while. As a result, I decided to turn back the clock to a sweet spot in the action hack and slash genre to the 2000s period with God of War 2005. The game's combat gives you light and strong attacks with the Blades of Chaos. The enemies are relatively simple at the start and get you comfortable with his movesets. There are roly-polies for the Souls fans, blocking and parrying, and combos that you can unlock by obtaining orbs, essentially the game's currency that enables you to upgrade your arsenal over time, which then unlocks abilities and improvements to the corresponding magic and equipment. The combat and the controls tied together feel seamless to navigate with on the controller. The combos themselves are pretty easy to perform once memorized, since there aren't as many buttons to worry about in contrast to fighting games. You unlock more combo variety as you upgrade your equipment, but what you already have works well enough for a lot of the engagements in this game. Most players on their first run will end up playing the normal difficulty where you can afford to mash away at the enemies, compared to what you see on Spartan and God mode, the game's hardest difficulties. Normal is more relaxed, where you can afford to make more mistakes, where you don't necessarily have to factor in the importance of utilizing certain attacks properly or which upgrades to invest in. Spartan and God mode though, this shit makes Elden Ring DLC look like a joke, to be honest. The enemies in this mode hit ridiculously hard, and in some cases you can even die in one hit. God mode is what you unlock after beating it the first time, but if you can't get through Spartan mode, then you are pretty much fucked. The harder difficulties really do force you to respect the dangers that each enemy represents and requires knowledge of their behavior, their mechanics, and their attack patterns. You cannot afford to get hit in this mode, ever, because it's even more difficult to get health, and you can't always rely on the security of health chests. Same goes for your magic. You also need to prioritize the more important items and magics, and you can't just upgrade anything you want unless you're giving yourself more challenges to overcome. Games like God of War 2005 were challenging enough for first-time players, but would also have difficulties like God mode or Spartan mode for the more masochistic crowds. I think the game does a great job of making room for both parties, where people can play the game casually or delve further into the game's combat mechanics and master the toolset. It's brutal in its execution, and is appropriate given the violent and cruel context surrounding this game's story and setting. Enemies themselves come in different shapes and have unique mechanics that force you to reassess your approach to the combat. Bigger enemies hit hard, and you can't always block their attacks. Enemies that can freeze you, which leads to a kill if they hit you, and these fuckers. Seriously, these guys are doing strings, and when I parry, I get hit most of the time anyways. Again, it's just a matter of recognizing their mechanics, their attack patterns, and then acting accordingly. It's a game that gets progressively harder over time and does expect you to develop the experience necessary to overcome the challenges presented. It's a game that's challenging but fair. Your arsenal starts off with the Blade of Chaos, the most iconic and recognizable weapon that Kratos has. A weapon of speed and distance due to the chains. A lot of the times it'll be your main weapon, and it'll also be the main weapon you'll want to max out if you want to increase your chances on the harder difficulties. As for the Blade of Artemis, it's basically Kratos' alternative weapon. It's like a strength weapon in this game. I didn't really use it as much, but it is a weapon that can help in certain situations, especially towards the end. Then finally you have the use of magic that you obtain from the gods during your playthrough. Poseidon's Rage, Medusa's Gaze, Zeus's Fury, and Army of Hades. They are all lifesavers when used at a time of need, and used appropriately, with Poseidon's Rage and Army of Hades being my favourite due to the AoE effect. Medusa is great for turning more annoying enemies into stone, but requires timing and not being interrupted with an attack. Zeus's Fury I didn't really use that much outside of attacking ranged opponents that I couldn't reach. The Rage of the Gods ability is basically I'm not fucking around anymore mode. Infinite magic, more damage to enemies and less damage to yourself. However, it takes time to fully build up, and if you don't have it during the more hairy engagements, then you'll have to complete the fight without it. As for the exploration and the puzzles, the game also has some great eye candy for a PS2 game, especially for those that are already immersed in the ancient Greek setting, like I was already saying about the epic and grandiose set piece. The puzzles themselves are also fairly stimulating and can be challenging at times, they're overall pretty good, with some requiring a bit more thought beyond just pressing buttons on the controller in a certain sequence. Both the platforming and puzzle elements allow for breaks in between the combat without changing the pace too much, and most of the time I didn't feel like I wanted to rush the joint and move on to the next area, except for this particular section. This section is the shittiest and most feces-inducing crap in this entire game, and honestly, I would rather lose my save data than do this shit again. In all seriousness though, the game has a mix of manageable platforming and puzzle sections, and also some unique and interesting ones, like the ones where you assemble the blocks together. Seriously, this mode actually got me into a Tetris mood after playing it. Hack and slash games have a huge emphasis on the combat, like you see in Ninja Gaiden or Devil May Cry, but God of War has a really good balance of everything, like from the combat to the platforming, the puzzles, the story, the exploration, discovering secrets, and also even having a treasure mode that you can have a look at to discover more of the game. When you beat the story, you have not just the God mode difficulty unlocked, but like I just said, the treasure selection to look at. It's an opportunity for those that want to look further into the development of the game, discover more background story of the world and its characters, and also a challenge mode that unlocks additional costumes. You even have a section for early 3D models of enemies and Kratos that never made it into the final product. Some of them look really cool, and it's a shame that the technology at the time didn't allow the developers to fully realize their potential. God of War 2005 is still a great game. While it doesn't hold up as well in comparison to its sequel and the following titles, the game is still a sign of the PS2's prowess as a console. It came with a deep story that intertwines the desire for revenge and peace, revolving around a cruel but sympathetic character where the gods are basically gaslighting him from beginning to end, eventually leading to a boiling point where the gods betray him in two, resulting to pressing circle angrily, and satisfyingly that is. Ancient Greece is beautiful and epic in scale and has some of the best set pieces I've seen in a PS2 game. Challenging but fair and rewarding combat with a great moveset that's not too difficult to memorize, but can be hard to master, especially on the harder difficulties, and some interesting boss fights that also have unique mechanics of their own. Just remember that if you're coming from the newer God of War entries, it's going to feel different in tone, gameplay, mechanics, its camera, and its controls. Older games don't always hold up as well as you think, but God of War 2005 still feels pretty good to play even in spite of its age. If you loved 2018 and Ragnarok and haven't played the earlier God of War titles yet, I would highly recommend that you start with this game. I'm looking forward to the PC release of Ragnarok, like I already said, and will revisit 2018 before I grab it. Also, Darksiders is still on the way too, and a few other projects along the way. See ya.